Parmadale Children's Village of St. Vincent de Paul was a Catholic orphanage that opened its doors on September 27, 1925. It is located at 6753 State Road, directly in the heart of Parma, Ohio. It was constructed on 180 acres of land purchased by Catholic Charities Corporations by John Gill and Sons Company, the same company responsible for building the Terminal Tower in downtown Cleveland. The name Parmadale was chosen by a committee of Catholic Charities who didn't want the words home, orphanage, or retreat reflected in the name. Instead, they wanted the name to not institutionalize the institution, but to make the children feel precious, unjudged, and to avoid stereotypes. The campus was truly revolutionary for its time. It was the first orphanage to implement a cottage residential plan, and it was very expensive. Between the cost of the massive chunk of land it was built on and the cost to build all of the different cottages and facilities, in 1925, it cost $1,458,000. If Parmadale were to be built today, it would cost about $21,551,572.80. The opening day was a massive event in not only the city of Parma, but as well as the entire Cleveland area. The Cleveland Automobile Club estimated that twice as many individuals were turned away from the ceremony due to traffic congestion, and as a result were unable to view the new institution described in the nation's health as one of the best conceived projects in child care in America. Boys that made up Parmadale in its early days came from St. Vincent's Orphanage in Cleveland, Ohio, and St. Louis Asylum in Louisville, Ohio. The orphanage originally consisted of 12 cottages for boys aged 6 to 16, Seton Hall, a laundry house, and a church and school building. Later on, more cottages would be added, as well as a gymnasium, a swimming pool, and a football field. In 1947, Parmadale welcomed girls for the first time from other local orphanages. Parmadale's mission statement was to provide an integrated system of innovative, spiritually based human care services designed to help troubled children and distressed families. Parmadale was well known and respected throughout the Cleveland area. They had sports teams such as football, basketball, baseball, and volleyball, but Parmadale is probably best known in the area for having a remarkable marching band. The band would perform at halftime at Browns and Indians games and would be a staple in parades throughout Northeast Ohio. They were very close with the athletic teams at John Carroll University. They would often watch and play at the halftime ceremony at the John Carroll football games. At this time, Parmadale was regarded as a positive contributor to our society. Children who went through Parmadale often tended to go through Ivy League schools or achieved excellence elsewhere throughout their lives. Well, most of them, but we'll get to that later. In the mid-1970s, Parmadale took a dramatic shift. With the orphan population declining, Parmadale was no longer a Catholic orphanage. There were no more nuns or priests, there were no more sports teams, no more marching bands. Now, they specialized in caring for dependent, neglected, mildly emotionally disturbed, educationally disadvantaged, behaviorally disoriented, and delinquent children from 18 months old to 18 years old. Parmadale would continue down the path as a disturbance institute until 2009, when it stopped receiving funding through the county to stay open. Up until 2014, the cottages were used for Parma City School District's Head Start program. After 2014, all of the cottages were abandoned along with the other buildings on campus. A new facility was built directly next to the old campus around this time, focusing on chemical dependency help for all people. This place is called Matt Talbot Inn. In 2017, the property that Parmadale lies upon was purchased by West Creek Conservancy. They intend to demolish all of the buildings to turn the former campus into a dog park. Here's an estimate of the idea they have in mind. This sketch is from a while ago, before vandals bashed in the clocks of the tower, so I don't know what they're going to do, but in late 2018, the demolition of Parmadale began. As of April 2020, all of the cottages are destroyed, except for the one that holds Matt Talbot inpatients, and all that currently stands is the former house building of the Parmadale employees, the church school, and Seton Hall. So how did this all happen? Why did Parmadale lose funding? In 2009, nearly 85 years since Parmadale opened, it was put to rest by an incident that occurred in Cottage 14. Faith Finley was a behaviorally challenged teenager who lived at Parmadale at the time. One night, after behaving poorly, the Parmadale workers took away her radio and headphones. However, the radio and headphones were her coping mechanism, and it is not acceptable to take that away from someone who has behavioral disabilities. Finley began to attack the employees, leaving them no choice but to hold her in a restraint that ended up being fatal. Finley began to yell at the workers, "I can't breathe, get off of me." But the workers disregarded her complaints and told her, if you couldn't breathe, you wouldn't be able to talk. Faith would die due to choking on her own vomit while restrained. This event is what ultimately led to Cuyahoga County refusing to donate to keep Parmadale up and running. Also, a longtime Parmadale worker named Cassandra Goodson pleaded guilty in 2014 to having sexual relationships with two female residents who were aged 13 and 15. Goodson, 34, had oral sex in office rooms and hallways of Parmadale with a 13-year-old and took the 15-year-old to the North Randall Hotel and had illegal sexual intercourse. She faced 6 counts of sexual battery, 5 counts of unlawful sex with a minor, and 1 count of interference with custody. Unfortunately, these are not all of the horror stories. A lot of them went undocumented and unreported, but the stories are out there, and I have them here for you. Here are some snippets I found on a Parmadale abuse forum that you can easily find online. I'll leave you with some snippets from this forum here. I also conducted an interview a few years back with a former resident of Parmadale during the early 1980s. Although his responses don't specifically spell out what happened, you can see the full story unfold before he can even say it. Here's that interview now. I was actually able to find audio interviews with a former resident and coach at Parmadale, as well as a former nun and principal. Here's some stories they shared in their interviews.
George, can you remember any people in the community of Cleveland that you got involved with Parmadale? Were there any well-known people in Cleveland?
Oh yes, I went to the Indians too, and they brought out all the great players and the teams that visit Joe DiMaggio. And a lot of Cleveland Indians. In fact, the Browns, we got the sports. Indians were back then was Jim Hagan and some pitchers, first baseman. I don't remember all the names because I was enamored by New York. I remember Joe DiMaggio and even Babe Ruth before the war, and Lou Rockney and Melton Peoples and the backfield of Notre Dame, the great names. But I brought out a lot of, Browns came out, including Lou Togrosa, but we got the Browns uniform. We ended up with Browns uniforms for those years.
You had enough uniforms for the whole team?
Yes, big time from the Browns.
Now, what year was that, George?
It was in the, when they shifted over, late 40s.
Funny or comical story you like to tell, and also if there's a story that stands out of a very sad or
probably
story.
I will. I have a very touching story. It's the saddest day of my life at Parmadale was when a boy died in our arms. Scott. I go to the gravesite. Scott's his name. Might be last. He was buried in his community uniform. He died in our arms. Don and I were there, and we couldn't save him. He broke his neck. He ran into a food cart. Thank God it wasn't on the playground or in the gym. And we were helpless. We took him in our arms to the hospital cottage. Sister Ethelreda gave him an adrenaline shot in front of us.
Up a minute. How did this happen?
He ran into a food cart and broke his neck.
Where were you?
He was going to the dining hall. We were going to the dining hall. He ran up the stairs around. They always ran to. We always told him, do not run. In fact, we warned, do not run to the dining hall. These carts were the height of this boy. His name was Scott. I forget first or last.
How high is
Yeah.
that, George?
That's as high as a food cart. We're about, what, 3?
Yeah, that's about 3, a little over 6.
Yeah, right. And that was the saddest story of Parma. Boy, what
So
a
he
heartbreaking
ran up
fun.
the stairs and
Around the corner to his dining hall where he eats, and the food cart was outside the door, and the part that you push right, that was right at his neck, and almost, it broke his neck. It actually broke his neck, and the blood came right up, and he walked down the stairs into our, we were just coming in, and they said, Doc George, and he was a doctor, and Don, I said, Don, you pick him, I mean, you're a doctor. Don picked him up, and his head fell off, and I picked his head, fell off his arm, really. The head fell right off his arm. That's about it, and the blood came out of his mouth. He was there, we couldn't say, they said, don't say a word, and they kept us in extra secrecy and silence away from the press. We called Toomey come down, Toomey called Ethelreda. He was taking the hospital card, he was given a needle in front of us. We were present all the time. A needle right in his heart. I never saw the adrenaline before. And the nun was good. She didn't make a mistake at all. Went in beautifully. Sister, the head nun. Ethelreda, was it?
Yeah, that's what I heard.
And that was the saddest story, and thank God it wasn't on the playground or in a gym or in a swimming pool. Yeah.
I know one boy was quite taken up, and he'd come to visit me in the classroom, and I said, that's not allowed. I said, you'll be punished if you come. But he said, I just want to talk to you. Well, of course, my classroom was such that like a little, almost like a little hallway. So as soon as the door opened, he dove out the window, and I was terrified. Hope he didn't break a leg or anything, even though it was a first, but he landed in the bushes. So that was okay. And I said, don't you ever do that again. I said, you're going to expel me and yourself both. But see, he went into the bushes. And there probably were others.
Now I would like to take the time to talk about a couple alumnus of Parmadale, starting with a true horror story, and then we'll get into a hero story. Let's see what you have to think.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly, and we begin today with Ed Edwards. Ever hear of him? Me neither. But he is potentially one of the most prolific serial killers of our time. This is a story about 2 jailbreaks, several murders, a criminal so good at pretending to be reformed that he talked his way onto a national game show, and his possible connection to unsolved murders from the Zodiac killings out in California to Jimmy Hoffa to John Benet Ramsey. Stay with me.
I don't even know where to begin.
Well, if you think about it, the beginning was the 1940s when he was just an 8-9-year-old kid.
He was born Charles Edward Myers in 1933 at the height of the Great Depression. His mother was a single woman. By the time he was 5 years old, she died of a gunshot wound to her stomach. Edwards was placed in Catholic orphanage. He was abused by the older boys, beaten by the nuns. He was kicked out of the orphanage for his uncontrollable behavior. He had rage, he was diagnosed a sadomasochist, and he started his life of crime.
At the age of 17, Ed joined the Marines, and a few months later, he went AWOL.
Burglary, car theft, robbery were his crimes of choice. Throughout the late 60s and in the 70s, Edwards was on federal parole and was allowed to travel the country, preaching to churches, police academies, radio programs throughout the country.
Now let's greet our ex-convict.
National TV game shows.
My name is Ed Edwards.
Claiming that he was now a reformed criminal and a happily married family man.
You're coming up with crime, you learn that you do it and you forget it's done and you go about your business until the next time. That's the way I was raised.
Wow. When it comes to what I've been able to find online is just the 5 that he confessed to.
Those confessions actually were on purpose to expose who he really was, and that's because he committed crimes for recognition.
Yes, you heard that correctly. One of the most infamous serial killers of all time is a product of Parmadale. As a child, Edwards' mother took her own life in front of him, which led to his enrollment at Parmadale. The abuse he faced there is ultimately what most say was the turning point of his life. Edwards' first known murder was of a 6-year-old girl named Suzanne Degnan, who he lured out of her own home to a basement and killed while her parents slept. He himself was only 13 years old. This is known as the night Chicago locked its doors, and Edwards is known as the lipstick killer. What did he do to this girl? He dismembered her in a wash basin. He left a false ransom note. And this case was particularly interesting because Ed had specifically targeted Suzanne based on something her father had done to him. When Edwards was at Parmadale, things got really bad after funding to the facility was cut, and as it turned out, Mr. Degnan was the man responsible for making that all-important financial decision. So in reality, parts of Suzanne were strewn through the sewers of Chicago merely out of spite for her dad. Edwards taunted the family, press, and police with false letters and phone calls. Edwards documented Suzanne's killing in his book, Metamorphosis of a Criminal. He will detail the 3 hours he had with her in a basement. Here is what he left at the scene of the crime. The wrong man was framed for this crime. He is accused by many as being the Zodiac Killer, and his most infamous murder would be the Black Dahlia murder. He was even at one time placed on the FBI's top 10 most wanted list. Edwards was such a wicked man, and it is hard to blame Parmadale as being the sole cause of his behavior. So let's take a look at another alumnus, Mr. John Shinsky.
My name is John Shinsky, and I'm the founder of the City of Children Orphanage in Matamoros, Mexico. At the age of 8, my father died, and my mother had to make a decision on what to do with me because my neighborhood was very tough, and she decided to send me to an orphanage, which was Parmadale in Parma, Ohio. I was there for a few years, and I went into a foster home, and then I was blessed to go to a great high school, Cleveland St. Joseph High School, and played football, wrestling, and track, and a very good academic program, and that allowed me to be able to get a scholarship to Michigan State. I was flying on a plane to Brownsville, Texas, and met a young man who was on a spring break trip, and I asked him what he was doing. He said, I'm going to this orphanage. He says, there's rats, and it's awful. And I said, well, send me something on it. And he sent me something on it, and so I went down there and visited with the people at the orphanage, and I asked them the question, what can I do to help you? And I expected they'd say, you know, food, clothing, and things like that. They said, we need a new orphanage, and it was at that time that I knew that that was my calling to serve in Matamoros, Mexico. I use the word calling because it's always been a passion of mine to be able to give back. I recognize the value of service and support because being a former orphan, you really don't have a family. And when you get the opportunity to go to a university like Michigan State and you have a quality education provided to you and so on, I recognize that that was a gift and a blessing that I received, and it's important that I give back and do the same thing for other young people. I think ever since I've been to Matamoros, I've probably helped out hundreds of children. We helped out children from another orphanage. We built 9 buildings for another orphanage to serve those children. We've done a lot of things in the community of building homes for the poor. And then, of course, in our orphanage, we've served over 60 children so far in a 3-year period. So there's a lot of need there, and there's a lot of opportunity there. But the most important thing from my perspective is if you can help one child to be able to make a difference in that child's life, and if that child can grow up and have the opportunities that I had and have the passion that I have for giving back, there's no question in my mind that those children can change generations to come, and they can eliminate poverty for several young children and open up a world of opportunity for them so that they can become successful and productive citizens in the future.
What an incredible story. John Shinsky, in my opinion, is the definition of what it means to be from Parmadale. He never had much, but he took what he did have and he ran with it. And he helped kids who struggled just like he did, and I find that very admirable. I guess I've given Parmadale kind of a bad rap in this documentary, but who would watch it if I only showed the sunshine? In reality, Parmadale did a lot of good things for a lot of good people. They have a very strong core of alumni who are just amazing and love talking about their days at Parmadale. I personally never went to Parmadale as a student, but I am a member of their alumni group on Facebook, and each and every one of the members is kind and loyal to what made them themselves. There is a reason there are still so many proud Parmadale alumni. I want to end with this. When a friend showed me Parmadale for the very first time, I was so taken aback by how spooky it was. At that time, it was newly abandoned and hardly vandalized. It's been there 3 years since those days, and sometimes I still like to go up there and try to imagine these moments in history play out. There is a really nostalgic feeling I get when I walk through those remaining halls that have millions of stories to tell. I know that it is illegal to trespass, but as long as you aren't vandalizing, I see no problem with exploring and putting pieces of stories together myself. I've been to Parmadale hundreds of times just to reflect and honor all the memories, relationships, and holiness that its graffitied walls need to see. So, the moral of the story is if you trespass, be careful, but more importantly, be respectful. There is so much forgotten history at Parmadale, and while it still stands, I feel we should honor it and celebrate it rather than help tear it down. Thank you for your patience and your time today, and remember, preserve history, and keep sharing your stories so they never die. Parmadale forever.